My name is Daniel Durazo, and I grew up in the city of Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico, which is right along the border, right next to San Diego. And it was really interesting growing up as a U.S. citizen overseas, technically, although I felt very much at home both in Mexico and the United States, because it helped me to understand how people in other countries perceive the United States. And as a diplomat, that's been a really useful skill to have. I've also had the privilege of living in Japan before I joined the State Department, and that offered me a whole different perspective on how people perceive countries that are far away, countries that they've never been to, and it really helps me when speaking to people from other countries to understand that just because I see things a certain way doesn't mean that they do, and that you often have to listen before you speak. My interest in the Foreign Service came from the fact that I've always been interested in understanding how people communicate with one another and how differences in language, differences in culture, differences in values impact the conversation that they might have. Even though the United States and Mexico are very close to each other, they're very different in many ways, and living through those differences helped me to have an understanding of what that looks like and inspired me to want to have an impact on how those conversations happen on a broader scale. And the Foreign Service was a good opportunity to do that. The Rangel program will prepare you for the Foreign Service like very few other things can. Primarily, it helps you to understand what the Foreign Service is like as an institution and what Foreign Service officers are like. One of the most useful things is that you get to meet people who have served overseas and with the State Department when you're in the Rangel Fellowship. And you don't just meet them sort of in the context of a meeting or a presentation. You actually get to sit down and talk to them, ask them about their experiences, ask them about their perceptions, and it's to the Rangel program's credit that they pick people who are comfortable talking about real problems, real challenges, real insights, real inspiration, and you don't just get the policy talk, you actually get people's perspectives on that sort of thing. The two things that I value the most in the Rangel program are the sense of community that you get when you're a Rangel Fellow. No matter where you go, you're likely to find at least one other Rangel Fellow wherever you are posted. And knowing that somebody else has shared that experience that you did can be really helpful in just letting you know that you have a friend no matter where you go. And the second thing is the congressional internship that you do at the very beginning of the fellowship. It's an opportunity not just to learn about how Capitol Hill works and how Capitol Hill oftentimes interacts with the State Department, which is very useful from a professional perspective, but those 10 weeks where you are in Washington, D.C., and you're constantly interacting with the other Rangel Fellows really helps to create a strong bond and a sense of community between the people who are in the Rangel Fellowship. I went to graduate school at the University of California in San Diego, and I did a master's degree in international relations, specializing specifically on Japan and the United States. And I think the most useful thing to do in graduate school is to use it as an opportunity to do two things. The first is to really figure out, if you don't know yet, what aspect of international relations you're very interested in. It's very easy to say that you're interested in international relations, but that's a very broad topic. And to use grad school and the classes and the activities there and the people you meet there to help refine where your interests really lie can be really helpful. And then another thing is to develop skills that you think will be helpful once you join the Foreign Service. You have the great luxury as a Rangel Fellow to not have to worry about whether or not you're going to get a job when you finish graduate school. You'll find that that consumes the time, energy, and attention of most of the other people in your cohort. But you can instead focus on thinking about what are the actual skills that I might have to use as a Foreign Service officer that will be helpful to me. And I invite you very much to think about skills in a broader sense, and not just in the sense that we think of stereotypically when we're thinking about international relations, but to think about the organizational skills that you'll need, the management skills, the note-taking skills, the presentation skills, the writing skills, all of the different pieces of the work that a Foreign Service officer does that you need to get good at in order to excel at this job and to get along well with your peers. And that's where the Rangel Fellowship comes in again, is that you have at your disposal all of these people who have already been in the Foreign Service for a while, and you can ask them, depending on where you're interested in serving or what type of job you're interested in, what are the skills that I need to build in order to be successful at the Foreign Service. And those things will change over time. Many years ago it might have been one thing, and now it might be something different. So keeping track of that and trying to build those skills, I think, is you have a very big opportunity to do that in grad school. In the Foreign Service, I've had the privilege of doing a variety of different things. I did my consular tour in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, where I served both in the non-immigrant visa unit as well as in the American Citizen Services unit. Those are two very different kinds of work. After that, I was the Cultural Affairs Officer in Muscat, Oman, in the Middle East. So I got to do cultural programs, coordinate exchanges, speaker programs, work a little bit on press, work a little bit on social media. And I think that's one of the privileges of being a Foreign Service officer, is that you get to do so many different kinds of things. And therefore the skills that you develop and grow are really wide and diverse, more so than I think they would be in a lot of other jobs. You'll often hear that consular officers have the best stories, and that's for a reason. When I was in the American Citizen Services unit in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, I had an opportunity of helping a young woman who was in Honduras with her daughter. And she was there because she had followed her husband, who had been deported to Honduras for a variety of reasons. And once they arrived in Honduras, she found that she was being increasingly abused by her husband, and she wanted to leave. But because of the laws in Honduras, it was difficult for her to leave the country and bring her child with her, because children in Honduras, minors, need to have the consent of both parents before they are allowed to leave the country. And so by coordinating with local law enforcement and with members of the local community, we managed to have a conversation with the family and essentially persuade them to allow the woman to leave with her daughter and essentially remove themselves from that situation. And that's a place where bringing all of the different resources that the United States Embassy has at its disposal to communicate with local authorities, to communicate with people in the local community, we were able to help change somebody's life and remove them from a situation that otherwise might have been very difficult to escape. You don't get the opportunity to do that in too many other jobs.